live webcast and the virtual meetings protocol, this has been circulated to all members, will underpin how this meeting is conducted. Can I just confirm that the live webcast is in operation, please? Thank you. Okay. Item 1. Can I have apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. We have apologies for this afternoon's meeting from Councillor Hayworth. Councillor Pearce is unable to make this session, but will hope to join us for the afternoon session at 2 o'clock. And for the public record, I can't see Councillor Bolton on the call at the moment. So as we stand, we have 28 members partaking in this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 2, confirmation of minutes. There's 2 sets of minutes to be approved as true and correct. Excuse me, true and correct record of the meeting. Can I have a proposal that from those who attended that meeting, that they're true reflection of that meeting?
I'm happy to propose, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a second, please?
I'm happy to second.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Cheadle.
And if everyone's happy, we'll vote by exception. So if there's anybody who's against this, can you please state it in the chat box? No.
I can confirm, Mr. Mayor, no one's typing in the box. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interests. I invite members to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests. Any declarations need to state if the interest is personal or a disclosure is pecuniary and the nature of that interest. Yes, Councillor Yelland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a personal interest in agenda item 6, recommendation 4, as I'm a member of Oakhampton Town Council.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Councillor Moody.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a personal interest being a member of the Meadowlands Pool and also being a member of the Tavistock Town Council.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else. Okay, thank you. Item 4, business brought forward by myself. I have no items to be brought forward. I would like to just say that please note that we have not had any questions from the public for this particular session.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, before we move on, sorry.
I've just noticed Councillor Ewings has come in a bit late. Councillor Ewing.
I do apologise, Mr. Mayor. I'm not very good at going from one screen to the other. The mouse gets stuck. I'd like to declare an interest as a member of Tavistock Town Council, please, for item 6.
Okay, thank you. Right. I'll repeat item 4 just for clarity. So I have no items to bring forward, but I just wanted to note that we've also not had any questions from the general public for this session. Okay, item 5, committee minutes. A, Hub Committee meeting as the 30th of June 2020, 28th of July 2020, and 15th of September this year. Councillor Jury, would you like to present the committee minutes, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meetings of the Hub Committee held on the 30th of June 2020, the 28th of July 2020, and the 15th of September 2020 be received and noted, with the exception of recommendations HC07, HC16, which is a standalone agenda item later in this summons, and HC 18. They are HC 78 to HC 83, HC 01 to HC 09, and HC 10 to HC 20, and can be found between pages 9 and 11, 13 and 15, and 1 and 5 of the separate circulation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we need to have a vote by exception for noting purposes?
Those are noted. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. White. In respect of recommendation HC07, I propose the following: that council be recommended to 1. Approve the removal of the free pest control, rats and mice treatment service for residents and replace it with a free service for benefits recipients only. And 2. Accept and approve the tender from Terminix to deliver the service in West Devon Borough Council areas. If I could have a seconder, please.
Happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Shall we take these individually for voting process or questions?
Mr. Mayor, there's nobody indicating a wish to partake or either by way of questions or debate, so I'd recommend that we can take this one on block via exception if you're happy.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So again, on block, if anybody has any concerns about this, if you can put it in the chat box, please. Nothing.
Once again, Mr. Mayor, there's nobody indicating a wish to type, so we'll anticipate that by unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. In respect of recommendation HC 18, I propose the following: that council be recommended to 1. Approve an increase in the council tax long-term empty property premium from the current 50% to the relevant maximum set out in the rating (brackets property in common occupation close brackets and council tax (brackets empty dwellings close brackets) Act 2018. 2. Increase with effect from the 1st of April 2021 onwards the council tax long-term empty property premium to 100% for properties that have been empty for 2 years or more. And 3. Increase with effect from 1st of April 2021 onwards the council tax long-term empty property premium to 200% for properties that have been empty for 5 years or more. And 4. Increase with effect from the 1st of April 2021 onwards the council tax long-term empty property premium to 300% for properties that have been empty for 10 years or more. All of those charges are for any period not exceeding 6 weeks where the property is not empty and shall be disregarded for the purposes of calculating the 2, 5 or 10-year empty period. If I could have a second, please.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So if we could have any debate.
There's a question in the chat box.
There's a question from Councillor Daniels. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to ask, how many properties are we, or do we have any idea how many properties would come under some of these new rules if we agree them? For example, how many properties have we got that have been empty for more than 2 years or 5 years? Have we got any idea of that?
I think we do. Someone will respond.
I can answer that question, Chairman.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's Lisa Buckle. So as of August, the council had 47 properties subject to long-term empty property premium. That's out of a total of 26,051 properties banded for council tax. On the 1st of April 2021, of these 47 properties, 4 will have been long-term empty for longer than 5 years, and there will be a further 8 properties reaching 5 years during the 2021 financial year. And on 1st of April 2021, 3 of the 4 properties mentioned would have reached the 10 years during the 2021 financial year.
Thank you. And does this include sort of semi-derelict properties? Because I know of one in my ward that seems to have been empty a long time, but wouldn't be habitable.
So the property, a long-term empty property, it has to be unoccupied, so not the sole or main residence of any person aged 18 or over, and it has to be substantially unfurnished for a period of at least 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're happy to go to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, as with the previous one, I'd suggest en bloc and by exception if you're happy.
Yep, fine.
Again, for those watching the live streaming, Mr. Mayor, there's nobody indicating a wish to vote against that recommendation. So we'll assume that unsubmitted or recommendation HC18 is therefore unanimously approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, we go to Development Management and Licensing Committee meetings. That's the 30th of June, 28th of July 2020. Can I ask Councillor Yellen to present, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meetings of the Development Management and Licensing Committee held on the 30th of June 2020 and 28th of July 2020 be received and noted. They are DM&L 5 to DM&L 8 and can be found between pages 17 and 19 and pages 21 and 23 on your agenda. Could I have a seconder, please, from the committee? Thank you.
Second. Crozier, second.
Thank you.
Thank you. And are we happy to note that?
Those are noted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now we go to item C, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, meeting 23rd of June, 4th of August and the 1st of September 2020. I'd like to ask Councillor Ewings to present, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meetings of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 23rd of June 2020, 4th of August 2020 and the 1st of September 2020 be received and noted with the exception of recommendations ONS 9. They are ONS 88 to ONS 95, ONS 1 to ONS 12 and ONS 13 to ONS 22 and can be found between the pages 25 and 30, 31 and 35 and 37 to 41 respectively. Before I ask for a vote, may I just ask for a correction to the minutes, please, on the 23rd of June, as they note that they were being held in the council chamber, not via Skype. And with that, may I have a seconder for noting purposes, please?
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. In respect of recommendation ONS 9, I propose the following: that Council be recommended to approve the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report for 2019-20 as outlined at Appendix A of the Agenda Report presented to the committee meeting. May I have a seconder, please?
I'm also happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber.
Thank you. So can we go to vote by exception again, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just checking the conversation bar, and there's nobody wishing to vote against that recommendation, so we'll therefore assume it's unanimously approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And then we have item D, Audit Committee meeting held on the 23rd of June 2020. If I could ask Councillor Davis to present, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, members. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee held on the 23rd of June 2020 be received and noted. They are AC1 to AC4 and can be found between pages 43 and 45. Can I have a seconder, please?
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Take a pick. Okay, so do we have any comment on that? If not, we'll again note.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's noted. Thank you.
Okay. Item 6, amended budget 2020-21. I ask Councillor Jury to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, you have in front of you a paper setting out our proposals for approving the amended budget for the current financial year. Members will be well aware that our projections after lockdown and the effect that had mainly on our income were for a shortfall during the current year of some £1.5 million out of our previously balanced budget of £7.2 million. After support provided by the government, that figure has reduced to a shortfall of just over £500,000 as shown in the papers. We have, of course, looked in considerable detail at the budget, including a members' workshop and feedback from members, and my thanks are extended to Mrs. Buckle and her team for the work they've done in that respect and for putting together this amended budget. It's my view that now is not the time for us to be making cuts or reducing our capacity as a council, and we have set out a number of ways in which we propose that we deal with this shortfall. We do, of course, have reserves for exactly the situation we are now in, and I hope that Council will be able to approve the options set out in section 5.2 of the report in order to produce that amended budget. Attached to the report is a schedule of reserves for member information and the note that we may, of course, need to rely on these reserves in future, depending on how the situation resolves and unravels from here. There are two other recommendations that will form part of our discussions today and for which we seek approval. Firstly, the Chief Executive and I, with the support of Councillor Cheadle, have proposed using £70,000 from the Business Rates Retention Earmarked Fund to set up a town centre support initiative. Details are as set out at Appendix 6. This is precisely the sort of activity that this fund is earmarked for, and I hope that members will approve. Secondly, the government guidance around qualification for the discretionary business grants changed, and I'm tempted to say again, and I obviously have said again, and we seek member approval to change the policy so that parishes and towns can apply for support under that fund. The details are as contained in the report. We're all familiar with it, and at this stage I would seek any questions that members might have on this item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions at all? I should say, if you want to put questions, just type questions in the chat box. Okay, silence. If we can have a recommendation proposed and seconded, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose the recommendations 1 to 4, which are shown on page 7 of your documentation in front of you.
And a second, please.
I'm happy to second those recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we're open to debate. Again, if you wish to debate, just type in the box. Councillor Moody, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to say thank you to everyone who has been involved in the collation of the amended budget, particularly the members who have been involved, the leader, deputy leader, and officers. But in particular, I would like to say thank you to Mrs. Buckle. I think she's done a tremendous job. I shall be supporting reporting.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Moody's stolen half my thunder in thanking Mrs. Buckle for such a comprehensive and excellent piece of work. Goodness, I don't know where we'd quite be without her, but I'll spare her blushes. The only other thing I'd like to say is, and it's sort of a statement of the obvious, I know, is that our finances overall are in a relatively perilous state, in that our overall 5-year projection still shows a deficit of around about 1.5 million, for which we have yet to identify the way in which we're going to balance that out over the 5 years. And so our reserves, as Councillor Jury said, in a sense are there for these sorts of occasions, but we can only use them once. Once they're gone, they're gone. So, and they've been built up patiently over the years. So I would just ask members to be aware, as we tread through this minefield of COVID over the next however long it's going to be, to bear in mind that our finances are tricky, and they're not going to get easier, I don't think, as we fight our way out of the COVID crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just expand on the comments made by Councillor Moody, if I may. In as much as I found that the vehicle that was used, the workshop idea to generate these recommendations, I found particularly useful and extremely well conducted. Speaking as something of a novice in terms of finance, I found it made my understanding of the situation very useful, very easy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, do we have any more comments? Any more debate? If not, we'll go for a vote on this. And this one. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I've jumped in there. Just to say, members, that it is a statutory requirement for any budget decisions to be conducted by a recorded vote. So it won't just be a named vote. This vote will be shown in the published minutes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at this moment in time, again for the public record, we have 28 members on the call. In alphabetical order, Councillor Ball.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgewater.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Coulson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ewings.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Jury.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kimber.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mott.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Musgrave. Councillor Musgrave. I'll try again at the end. Councillor Ratcliffe.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Renders.
Yes, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Ridgers.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis.
4.
Councillor Southcott.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Spetague.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Vashon.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
4.
And just to double check, members, Councillor Musgrave. I think Councillor Musgrave dropped off. So therefore, members, that vote is therefore 27 and unanimous in favour of parts 1 to 4 of the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks very much. Right, item 7, the corporate debt recovery policy update. I'm to advise that the meeting that this item has been deferred. That's to the next council meeting on the 8th of December 2020 for consideration. Now, as this particular session has gone quicker than expected, we will be stopping now or adjourning for lunch and reconvening at 2. But before we do, I'd like to just say that before we stop for lunch, please take the time to look at any questions that you wish to raise under item 8. And if you're unsure if any of these fall under part 2, if you're concerned at all, please contact Mr. Fairburn for advice. I believe that we should provide residents who are following this procedure with a clear picture of what we are facing today. So I intend to keep all part 2 questions until all the basic questions and debate have been completed. If required, I will then get into part 2 for any confidential questions and debate, and then bring it back to part 1 for a final vote. Now, do I have any questions, or do you have any questions on that statement? If it's not clear. Yes, Councillor Ewing.
I was just wondering if you will be reiterating some of that again at the start of the meeting at 2 o'clock, when there may be more people on the line watching the call, just so they understand our proceedings.
I was going to do that. Some of it I can't, because it's for members to look at questions now and come back ready at 2 o'clock. But I will certainly do a précis, because we've also got councillors who won't be attending till 2.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So if there's no more questions upstream, if I could have that confirmed, please. Thank you very much, and welcome back. Sorry for the slight delay. We've had a technical hitch, which comes with this sort of technology sometimes. So we now come on to item 8, which is the fusion update. Before I go any further, just to remind people and those who've just joined us, before lunch I did ask that all members look at what questions they want to ask and to check with our legal advisor to see if they're concerned at all that may fall into a part 2 section. What I intend to do with this particular item is that I believe that we should provide the residents who are following this procedure with as clear a picture of what we're facing today. So I intend to keep all part 2 questions until all the basic questions in debate have been completed. If required, I will then go into part 2 for any confidential questions and debate. And once they're finished, move back into part 1 for the final vote. And as I said before, I hope that this is clear enough. But if you want me to make it clear, please state so in the little chat box. Now, I note that Councillor Moody didn't have any sound. Okay, nothing coming up in the chat box. So, although this would normally be a health and well-being item, it's been agreed that Councillor Jury will introduce this. So if you could start the introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I expect, like me, some of you have been watching the government announcements at lunchtime. As far as I can see from what's been said so far, it doesn't change the nature of the decision that we have in front of us. Anything that we decided to do today would, in any event, be subject to national or local lockdown should that occur. If that were to happen, my understanding would be that businesses would be assisted, and in the case of the leisure centres, we would, depending on the decision we make today, obviously revert back to a mothballing situation. So I think the decision is still the same, notwithstanding anything that has been said by the Prime Minister at lunchtime today. You do have a comprehensive report in front of you. My thanks go out to the teams of Mr. Brooke and Mrs. Buckle, with considerable help from John Parkinson, and to colleagues right across the council who've had input. There are a number of issues that I'd like to highlight. Firstly, as the Mayor has said, the appendices do contain some exempt information, and councillors should be aware of that. It's really important that we have this debate in public, but if anyone needs to refer to that information, we will deal with it in questions at the end by moving into part 2 for a brief period. Secondly, let's consider the legal position. In section 3, there's advice about terminating the contact with Fusion. I'd like to make the following points. Firstly, Fusion were chosen as our partners to run the leisure centres after an exhaustive tendering process. They were considered to be far and away the best option. Their plans were good and sound, and reports to Council via overview and scrutiny have been well received. The COVID crisis has caused great difficulties throughout the sector, and most centres still remain closed. That's not to say that perhaps Fusion's response couldn't have been different. I think it might have been, but let's not underestimate the problems they have experienced, not least dealing with some 20 councils across the country, and those experiences that they are learning from. My feeling is that they deserve our support. The legal advice has also shown that there would be considerable costs in any event to the council if we exercise the break clause within the contract. So my conclusion is that we should support and work with Fusion to bring about the previously agreed plan or something close to it as soon as we are able to, and currently to get the leisure centres open. Thirdly, there is the role of the council in supporting health and well-being in the borough. One of the ways we do this, and have planned to do this, is via the operation of the leisure centres. These are big, expensive, complex units, and it's difficult to see the private sector running those in a rural area. I have heard from many members of the public explaining how important these facilities are to individuals. Those communications are much appreciated and reinforce my view that these facilities are crucial to health and well-being plans and to addressing physical and mental health issues at this difficult time. My conclusion is that if we are able to reopen the leisure centres and get as good a service as we can operating, then we should do that, and then we should do that now. Then there are the financial considerations. Mothballing these centres will cost the council money. Working with our partners at Fusion to get them open and run services with the current restrictions and the reduced footfall that will result will cost more money, and the figures that are required are clearly highlighted in the report. We can fund this money in the short term, and I feel this is the time to use some of our reserves. Much of the figure of 292,000 mentioned in the report is a one-off cost and will not affect future years directly. In the longer term, it's less clear, of course, so it's important that we work with Fusion to quickly move towards a break-even position if we can. And Fusion themselves have not indicated they will need support beyond March 2021. It's also important that we continue to lobby government for support and that we fully examine the implications of this position in our medium-term financial strategy. We will be asking the Financial Stability Working Group to consider the effect on our future financial position. Quite aside from the immediate financial support is the projected future contribution, amounting to some £10 million over the lifetime of the contract, that we will expect to materialise. There has to be doubt about the ability to achieve these results going forward, but investing some time and money now to restart the centres and help them move back towards rebuilding their planned capacity and market share has to be worthwhile. As you'll all appreciate, building back that income, if at all possible, is going to be an important part of our future planning. And in my view, the sooner we can get working on that, understanding the figures and collecting data, the better. One really important element in this is the excellent work that Mr. Brooke and Mrs. Buckle have done in negotiating with Fusion. Any support we offer now will be by way of loans or deferrals of management fees anticipated from the contract. Whilst this doesn't remove risk, and I have to accept there is a significant potential liability here if Fusion fail, it does mean that we have an opportunity to protect our position and to recoup the sums provided in assistance if and when Fusion's economic prospects improve. In my view, we therefore have a vested interest in working closely with Fusion to relaunch the centres and to do it positively and well. That brings me on to my final points. The importance of standing with our communities, being positive and making a statement through what we can deliver. At the start of lockdown, we were asked by government to do whatever was necessary to support our communities and to protect the vulnerable. We did that, and our communities rallied round and helped each other. In my view, this is the next step in that process, and we must continue to support our communities, support our residents, and step up to the plate. Our actions in approving support for Fusion to reopen with certainty will send a positive message not only to residents and users, but also to businesses. The centres are an important part of the fabric of our two largest towns, draw people into those towns and provide employment. The flip side of that is the completely negative message it would send to have two boarded up, mothballed hulks of buildings sitting in the centres of Tavistock and Oakhampton. So you'll not be surprised that when I come to make the recommendation to Council, I will be proposing that we provide support to Fusion to reopen both leisure centres, and whilst I appreciate there will be concerns about some of the implications of that approach, I hope that Council will accept that the benefits are clear and positive, and that they will support me in taking a lead on this issue for the benefit of the residents across the borough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm very happy to take any questions, if needed, with the support of Mrs. Buckle and Mr. Brooke.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Hibsey, please.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the recommendations here, 1 through 3. I'm slightly puzzled by the word or the phrase "consideration given to" in recommendation 3. I wonder if Councillor Jory could just clarify that for me. Is that if one of the two options there, 3A or 3B, were to be chosen, does that mean that that is a definitive intention of implementing them, or does the word consideration mean some uncertainty?
Councillor Cherry?
I don't think so, Councillor Hipsey. Clearly, the way the report was written was to give a number of different options. I have said from quite an early stage that, having read it, I wanted to go with the wider of the two options. When I present the recommendation, I will be recommending that we change that wording to reflect that view. I think the consideration in there was because there were two different options that we needed to consider.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to ask what progress has been made in lobbying the government to provide funding for contracted out leisure centres. They've provided grants to council-run leisure centres, and this seems very unjust that we're in a position of having to use some scarce reserves and could potentially lead to financial difficulties in the future. So wondering what's been done and what response you've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel. We have made representations. Representations have been made at a national level as well through the Local Government Association. I've not heard anything concrete back, but clearly our MP has expressed his support, and we wait to hear. It's not out of keeping with other sectors where support is being waited for. My view is that we press on. We have to take that responsibility. We will continue to lobby, and if we can make progress, clearly we will. But I can't report back that there has been any definitive progress.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ridges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I want to ask refers, it's drilling down in a bit more detail. It's under the reputation section it's 4.27. The officers state that obviously the council has in 2018 we had a population of 55,000 and 3,270 individuals were using the leisure centres. That's 6% of the borough's population. Do we know, and do we have any more detail on where that 6% reside? Is it of Oakhampton postcodes, Tavistock postcodes? Is there any more detail on the 3270 who are 3270 who are using the leisure centres?
Thank you, Councillor Richards. I don't have any other information. Mr. Brooke, do you know if there is any more detailed information?
Thank you, Councillor Jory. There is detailed information from the membership postcodes, which I'm not able to share with you today, but I can follow up. What I can do is say that we know from, let's say, the sector understands that in rural locations, 20 minutes drive is about what most people, on average, are prepared to make to visit a leisure centre. And I've looked at what a 20-minute drive looks like. And I can circulate after this meeting what that map is. But essentially, because of the road network, you wouldn't be surprised to say that the majority of West Devon, with the exception of central Dartmoor, well, not central because Princetown's got a road, but the northern sector of Dartmoor is not covered by that because you've got to walk a long way before you can get to your car. But all around Tavistock, all around Oakhampton, Chagford, North Taunton, Hatherley, Princetown, and then stretching down into Plymouth boundary are all within 20 minutes drive. So essentially, but if you open both centres, if that was what you had in mind, then you can be confident that the majority of people within the borough are within 20 minutes drive of those centres. I hope that's helpful.
But just to confirm, there are no postcode data of the people who are using currently or have used in last year as this the 3270 in 2019 who used it.
So
or it's not available to share. It's not available to share at the meeting.
Well, there are GDPR issues along with having people's membership data. So the membership data is owned by Fusion, rightly so, and of course the data has to be treated with some care. So we have been having a conversation with Fusion to get that analysis where we can.
I understand their names and addresses would be yes, but the postcodes would just be of interest.
Okay. Yeah, I will follow it up as I have been with Fusion, but no, not right now. I'm afraid I can't give you that information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions, if I may, please. The first one is, when does the financial support clock start ticking? Would that be from today with whatever is agreed at council, or would it be from the date of the leisure centre opening, that being Meadowlands, if it should be agreed to open? And if council approves that Meadowlands reopens, how long a period will it be before the residents will be able to use the facility? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Mr. Brooke, I think you're probably best placed to answer at least the second part of that question.
Thank you, Councillor Jory and Mr. Mayor. 2 weeks is the amount of time needed to get the leisure centre reopened. I'll need to confirm that with you because clearly it's not, I'll just need to double check that, but that is the period of time needed to get it live. I think we can be confident that it'll be around that amount of time. But with respect to the financial support, is that one you would like me to answer, or you got that?
If you are able to, thank you. Yes.
No problem. So we already decided as a council to support up to the end of this month. So the financial clock starts running, if you like, from next month. And then any financial support that's agreed will be in arrears. So we won't be making any further payments until the end of October. And that will take, and then it will carry on depending on what's decided until the end of this financial year. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that whatever we do, there is a cost to to West Devon Borough Council, especially when we're a little uncertain about our own finances for the future. I am in favour of opening meadowlands and parklands as we go forward. And really what I'm touching upon is partly what Councillor Ridges was talking about, the numbers that are attending. And I know with parklands, which has been open, the numbers are being restricted due to the COVID regulations. They can't allow just everybody in at once, the safeguarding issues, etc. But what I wanted to know is actually a lot of people who use meadowlands and parklands in the past have used it before work, so they've been going in at 7 o'clock in the morning. But with parklands at the moment, it opens at 8 o'clock, so people who are using the gym before work or swimming before work can't actually do that. I was just wondering, do we have any commitment from Fusion that if we do support them, they will try and extend the hours so that more people can get in, especially at 7 o'clock in the morning?
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Mr. Brooke, would you be able to, from your time of talking to Fusion, have any information on that? Certainly, if they've got restricted numbers, it would seem to me to make sense to make good use of the time that's available.
Yes, no, thank you, councillors. If I could draw you to section 4.49 of the report, the first bullet point, it does set out the opening hours, as indeed has been stated in this meeting, 8 a.m. start. But I think the important point is that these hours are to be reviewed upon considering the usage data. So Fusion and are absolutely, I mean, it's in their best interests, and it allows them to deliver the service, and it's definitely what we would like to see. So there is a commitment from Fusion to keep their opening hours under review, and I think we would probably support them in taking a sensible decision to facilitate people to use the leisure centres at a time that's convenient for them. But clearly they probably wouldn't open it earlier than 8 o'clock if people's user habits don't support that. But yes, it's there to be reviewed, and I will make that point.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. I think that reinforces the benefits to us in working positively with Fusion as partners to get the best result for everybody.
Can I just respond, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly. Yes, please.
Yeah, because I think probably as certainly the councillors in Oakhampton have been approached by quite a few of our residents asking it for it to be opened at 7 o'clock, and they would use it. And I'm sure if Meadowlands is up and running, I'm sure the residents there will want to use it as well. So I think really we should put some pressure on Fusion to, if we open both centres, to open at 7 o'clock to get as many people in as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. We've noted that, and we will take that forward.
I would personally just say, I guess that depends on the staffing levels that Fusion has available. But I certainly agree with Councillor Davies that we have had quite a few people concerned that it's not being opened earlier. Yeah. Councillor Ball, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my question, well, I had two questions, but Councillor Davies asked one of them. I suppose my second question follows on from that one, really. It's just that the general sort of plans of taking things forward. I think, there are going to be challenges with things going forward, particularly if restrictions are maintained, which it certainly looks like they are going to after today's announcements. Do we have a timetable set in place for regular conversations with Fusion about helping to improve patronage? Councillor Davies mentioned one example of that, but there must be other ways of being able to increase patronage as well as maintaining that tension of social distancing as well, and really it follows on from Councillor Ridge's question as well, which of course you need people coming through the door paying the way to make things work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I know that Mr. Parkinson is talking to Fusion on a regular basis, and that even our communications section have been in conversation with Fusion to try and get their PR improved. I don't know whether Mr. Brooke is able to say anything else.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate and strengthen the message that the communication side of any decision that's taken today is absolutely fundamental and so important. It's a really big decision, this, that you have to grapple with, and it's really important that it's communicated clearly and the reasons why. And assuming that one or more centres are open, then we absolutely need to be pushing out the message that the health and wellbeing options are there, that it's good for you, that we should be encouraging our residents to get out and use them. So we will be absolutely on the front foot to push this message. And I would also reiterate the amount of pressure we are putting on Fusion to improve their side of things. I think we can all recognise that this has been one of their bigger limitations through all of this has been the comms, and we're not shy in telling them that. We are in a partnership, but we do need to make sure that those messages are heard. And you have my assurance that we are absolutely applying that pressure to them. So I hope to see some good, strong communication come forward off the back of whatever is decided today.
Mr. Mayor, may I just respond to that
Yes.
very briefly? Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Brooke. That particularly the last part of your response is very positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that having been chair of the working group last year set up by ONS to look at the usage and gather the views of the people using the leisure centres, we were really pleased with how the leisure centres were received and how important, and we saw how important they are to people, particularly children, and the GP referral scheme. And I think, you know, I would be very much inclined to support Fusion to carry on, having done that and heard people's views. I know that we did recommend some improvements and upgrades, but I suppose some of those will be delayed now. But on the whole, I think they're really vital assets for our community. Thank you.
This is actually question time, but I was hoping you might have a question at the end of that. But yeah, thank you. Councillor Hatchon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question really is regarding on the facilities that will be continuing, specifically at Parklands, because I've had one parishioner who's asked about the therapy sessions that have been offered there, which have actually stopped at the moment. I'm just wondering if those facilities will be opening again, particularly for NHS referrals, and that's the physiotherapy sessions.
Thank you, Councillor Basham. My understanding is that it will be as full a service as possible that will be offered. Mr. Brooke, do you have any more detail on that?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, they're not up and running yet. I know they are on the radar of Fusion as a thing that's next to turn to. So I think it's another one of these, when we have clarity over the direction of travel, I think it's another very important point to be raising with Fusion going forward. So there's been conversations about them, but to my knowledge, they haven't started yet. But the reason they've been in conversation is because we're having those, how can we get them restarted? Who do we need? Have we got the correct qualified people in the centre? Because they've got to be a level 4 qualified person in order to be able to do the cardio rehab sessions, which I believe are the most well used. And so Fusion are working on getting their staffing appropriate. So I think it's fair to give them a direction of travel in terms of the political involvement here and how many centres we want to have open, if at all. And then when that is known, I think we can be working on getting them open as soon as possible in terms of the GP referrals. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis, please.
Thank you. What scrutiny will Fusion be experiencing from West Devon, please? Have we a programme?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sellis. Fusion have made regular reports to overview and scrutiny. Mr. Brooke, I don't know whether there are plans for us to have that more regularly. I would imagine that their work is probably going to be cut out in any event, trying to get things up and running.
Yeah, yes, that's an interesting one. We've never had as much engagement with Fusion in the last 3-4 months as we've had more in the last 3 or 4 months than we've ever had before. We have a requirement going forward to undertake open book accounting. So there is an exorbitant amount of scrutiny going on at the moment, and more, and I think that's great, and we need to continue to do that as we step into support if that's the decision. In terms of formal reporting, that's obviously another question, and I think that's perhaps something we can pick up after this meeting. I'm happy to take recommendations. Neil, maybe we can have a conversation, and with the Mayor as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Given the investment or the spending of taxpayers' money, we clearly have a duty of care to our residents. So thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a question over the statement in the report that Fusion believe this will be the last time they will need to come and seek financial support from us. And I just wonder on what that confidence is based.
Thank you. I don't know if Mrs. Buckle is able to answer that, or whether again it would be Mr. Brooke.
Lisa, you want me to come back? But I mean, that's a matter of reporting the facts as we have them, Councillor Jory. So it's been indicated to us by Fusion that is their intention, and of course their business plan and future income streams as forecast all support that point. But clearly nobody has future vision. So I suppose that's the limitation of that statement.
So I can't hear Mr. Brooke.
Oh, my apologies, Councillor Cheadle. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, but you faded out during the last statement.
Sorry. So yes, I was just saying that it's just a report on the facts as we have been told them, and their business case and future usage upon which their business case is based do support that position. But my last point really was that clearly nobody has quite certainty over the future at the moment, because there are so many unknowns. So I think we have to take it as we do with all facts at the moment. That's fair.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. It doesn't help much, Councillor Shield, but it's based on the forecast that we have. So hopefully that gives some comfort.
Well, I don't think it does. I'm not suggesting anyone is being untruthful here, but I don't think any of us can predict what the likely COVID situation is going to be a week from now, let alone 3 or 4 months from now. So I think we have to take statements like that with caution.
I agree, and we can't. There's nothing really we can second guess about what's going to happen over the next few months, I think. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bridgewater.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I understand that Fusion at Parklands are doing a provision for health. I think it's this week or next week. Obviously, going forward, if we manage to open Meadowlands, the residents and members of Meadowlands have missed out on this opportunity, and they've been paying their membership for the last 5 months. Have Fusion got a plan in place if we do open Meadowlands to take that forward so that they can get the same options and offers that the Parklands has received? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgewater. I've no knowledge that is part of Fusion's plans, but I would suggest, Mr. Brooke, it might be something that we and Mr. Parkinson would discuss with them.
Thank you, Councillor. Absolutely, we will do that. Yes, I think Fusion will want to cement their plans when they know what our intentions are.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Chat box has come to a stop. No? I'm wondering if I should ask if there's anybody who wants to bring questions forward, which would be normally in part 2. At this point, I'll take advice from Mr. White here, because if you have
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can only echo what you said. If any members have any questions relating to the Part 2 or pink exempt appendices, then we'll need to go into closed session. And I can already see that Councillor Renders has indicated a wish to ask a Part 2 question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So if I can have any others who want to speak, again, I'll take advice as to whether we hold this until we do debate and then do Part 2.
My sense, Mr. Mayor, my recommendation to you would be if we could take the Part 2 questions in a job lot, if you like, and then come back into Part 1, then the leader can propose his recommendation and we can debate wherever possible in the open session. So if we can just take the Part 2 questions first, and cut the live stream, I think that would be helpful. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So if I can ask the live stream be cut, because if we go into Part 2, for those who are watching, these are confidential issues which we can't let the public see. It's not because we're just closing the doors. There's something from a legal perspective we have to do. So if we Thank you very much for those live streaming. Thank you very much for your patience. So if I could now ask Councillor Jury to do the recommendation and proposal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose the recommendations that are shown on page 33 of the report. Item recommendations 1 and 2 exactly as written on the page. I'd like to make proposal item 3 to read as follows. That the council agree to extend the minimum level of financial support so as to deliver improved health and wellbeing outcomes as follows. Opening Meadowlands (Tavistock) as well as Parklands to have both leisure centres fully open would cost an extra £200,000 as well as the £92,000, a total of £292,000. Any extension of financial support from the minimum level is recommended to be funded from the business rates retention earmarked reserve. If I could have a seconder, please.
I'm happy to second, Leader.
I'm quite happy to second that.
All right, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm quite happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
Right, thank you. So, Councillor Jury, would you like to take this into debate? You're muted, Councillor Jury.
Sorry, Councillor. Yes, we can take this back to debate. I think there are some individuals who would like to contribute to the debate. Councillor Mott being one.
Yes, Councillor Mott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support the recommendations as put before us. However, I would like to make it clear that that would be conditional on Fusion improving on their commitment to have adequate communications with their customers and to have a proper and thorough positive promotion of their facilities. And I'm going to say that and say even be aggressive, bearing in mind that the leisure facilities are not currently open within Launceston, and that is well within their catchment area for Tavistock to be able to garner more membership. I would also like to know that as we are supporting this facility at the request of some of our residents, to the detriment of some of our other residents who don't use these facilities, that they support this facility and that they go back and use the facilities. Therefore, we would like to see an increase in the membership and to see that the facilities are being used to their full. I would be really disappointed after spending all of this money on the facilities to find that the residents aren't supporting us in that by using them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sheila, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I intend to support the proposal to offer Fusion the loan to enable the reopening of both facilities, but I do remain concerned over the Council's overall financial situation because it's far from healthy. Our cumulative budget deficit over the next 5 years is around about £1.5 million, and the reserves from which we intend to source the loan to Fusion were clearly not established for the purpose we're now using them. The medium-term financial strategy must include a detailed analysis of our options should the risk of further requests materialise, and the Financial Stability Working Group must ensure that this happens before April 2021. Those listening to this debate should be left in no doubt that West Devon Borough Council simply does not have the financial resilience to perpetually fund a discretionary activity such as this. And the final thing I'd like to make a point about is something that Councillor Mott's just raised. It's a crude analysis, but around about 5% of our residents use these facilities, but of course they are funded by 100% of our residents. So 95% of the residents are funding the 5% that choose to use the facilities, and a quick calculation suggests that the level of subsidy is around about £50 for each person that uses the centre for the next 6 months. So we do have to bear in mind not only the advantages of these leisure centres to the ones that use them, but the potential disadvantages of these centres to the majority of residents that don't use them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgewater, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd echo sort of what Councillor Cheadle has said there, but I do think that I will be supporting 3B to open both centres. I think now is the opportunity with the Life Centre closed in Plymouth. We've got the opportunity with a decent PR campaign to draw people into the Meadowlands area and use the swimming pool. We know that Kelly College at present is rammed to the hilt. We can certainly take some of that off them and give people ample time to use the leisure facilities within the Tavistock area whilst supporting a health and wellbeing provision. So I should be supporting 3B. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ewing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny and a member of the Financial Stability Working Group, I speak regularly with Mr. Brooke, Mrs. Buckle and Mr. Parkinson, as well as senior members of Fusion. We have a very open and honest working relationship that has worked very well since the start of this council in 2019. Fusion have agreed to be scrutinised even more than they are used to. They have totally agreed and actually last week commenced a working relationship with our communications. Sorry, one moment. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's okay.
They have left themselves open to working very much more closely with us than before. As members know, they have to provide a full record of their business and accounts and statement to the to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to go through on an annual basis. They do appear on our agenda quite regularly, and I'm sure that working with yourself and the leader, as was said earlier, and the officers, it may actually be that they appear on the ONS agenda for every meeting to scrutinise their work and their accounts that we can see on a regular basis. I would also like to support Councillor Davies' question about the opening of the centres at 7 o'clock. it's not just the people who would like to go to work that use the pool then, but actually Tavistock Swimming Club use Meadowlands, and I'm sure Oakhampton Otters do, for children to be able to train before school. Young people that are in national groups for swimming need a minimum of 15 hours in a pool, which they have all been lacking at the moment. So I will be supporting option B, and with my other hats on, keeping a very beady eye on the finances, as this council will not be able to support them any further, because that will be a detriment to, I think, as has already been said, the other 95% of the population of West Devon that do not use the swimming pools. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Ball, I missed you out. So
that's quite all right, Mr. Mayor. I'm perfectly happy to wait my turn. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, as the other speakers, I will be supporting the opening of both centres. I acknowledge the points that fellow members have made, certainly around the concerns of the finances for us as an authority. I do, however, slightly disagree with the opinion of the centres. They are a discretionary service, of course, but what they do within the community is far wider than just provide swimming facilities. There's a greater health and well-being provision that is out there, and obviously for Parklands particularly, its geographical position right next to the school. There's many other things that go on as a side product as a result of being there. I know we're specifically talking about the swimming pool, but we need to think about the facility as a whole. The other thing I wanted to say is that on those provisions that Councillor Ewins referred to Councillor Davis's point, and obviously Councillor Vachon mentioned about the extra things such as the physio. We really do need to be putting gentle but firm pressure on Parklands and on Meadowlands, through Fusion to open those facilities up. The referral through the doctor's facility, particularly for physio, is a valuable tool. And we talk about sort of members of the community not using the swimming pool, but who knows who might need to use the facility for physio, through either an accident or a medical condition. So I think that's also important. I think the final point I'd like to make is also an important point. You've got to remember, we've only recently started the contract with Fusion. We've got a long-term commitment. It would send completely the wrong message if we didn't support them at this time, as difficult as that decision is. And it isn't an easy decision, and I agree with Councillor Cheadle on that. But it would send completely the wrong message. And I think we owe it to the communities to support this going forward. So I certainly will be. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak.
thank you. Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to suggest that even though there is going to be a possible second lockdown, or if not a lockdown, at least a restriction on general activities, I don't think, therefore, in that context, that we're going to be making use of these wonderful facilities, whoever runs them, for possibly over the next 6 months. And that's my first real concern, is that we are going to be paying for something that isn't used. Also, I would have liked some kind of an idea about what other, we have got ourselves into the position where we're using a private facility. I would like to know what other private facilities could do better than Fusion, and had the choice of maybe using them or even planning to use them in the near future. I am not necessarily sure that fusion is our best option, but I'll be supporting it this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sellis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, I'd like to thank the residents that have contacted me over many weeks, and I like the feel of the way this is going. For brevity, councillors have already asked or voiced many of my opinions and views. I particularly like the comments Councillor Ball made about the social prescribing, which is where GPs and physios do prescribe swimming, and we are all very aware of the health and well-being benefits. So I am minded to support the opening of both places. And as for having a crystal ball about what happens with COVID, none of us know. I think we've all probably got a good feeling. However, I think we've been given some reassurance from the Section 151 officer about, and also the lead member for finance, that we've given us some consolation about how we're not crippling ourselves with any financial support, and Fusion are under no illusion whatsoever that they have to up their game. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I will be supporting. I will be supporting the motion as is outlined by Councillor Jury. I will say that I think Fusion is actually in an impossible situation. They're a registered charity, and charities, of course, shouldn't or don't make a profit. They can make a surplus, but not actually a profit as such. So it's very difficult for them to build up any form of meaningful reserves that can be sort of for an emergency use in this sense. And as it's been very well documented, this pandemic is not anything that anybody could have anticipated in that position. And I think I would reiterate what we've talked about before, how important it is that central government is lobbied via, because we have two MPs, we've got Geoffrey Cox for the Meadowlands end and Mel Stride for the Parklands end, that it is vital that as many people as possible really contact their MPs to say how important it is, this provision is, and that the position that we're in at the moment is not sustainable going forward in terms of what West Devon can do. We have limited resources, finite resources, and the need that we need to provide on a statutory basis. So while we're supporting this motion, or at least I'm supporting this motion going forward, depending on how this pandemic plays out, then further support might well be needed in the future, and it is absolutely essential that government funding does come down to support organisations such as Fusion that are not sitting within the council itself but are being contracted, so they can actually get some financial help that other businesses have actually benefited from, so they can be in a position to continue to provide an absolutely vital service. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Spedigan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I agree with absolutely everything Councillor Yelland's just said, and she's made what I have to say a bit shorter, actually. I'm also mindful of the financial burden we're placing on the authority with this, but I believe strongly that the physical and mental health benefits to having opportunity to exercise and socialise distance, of course, at this point outweigh the risk of those burdens. So I will be supporting 3B this afternoon. I also think, although there is much uncertainty, and as my colleagues have just alluded to in a variety of ways, the finite amount of reserves we have to support these matters means that there absolutely must be some support from central government. In addition, I think there is something else we can all do, as councillors, as residents, and that is to be mindful of how we're behaving in terms of social distancing and wash your hands, keep your faces covered. the better the pandemic is managed from a infection point of view, the sooner these times will be behind us, and we look forward to the leisure centres being full and bustling at all times.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, James, for mentioning the social distancing and the things we can do individually and every other member of the public. We took a very important decision at the last council meeting to actually open the Oakhampton facility, and I know Tavistock was disappointed they didn't come along, but it did give us the insight on how quickly people come back, and unfortunately it hasn't been as quick as we hoped. Now, if we were strictly businessmen, we'd have a hole in the head if we supported this, but we are going to support it because I believe there is the number of people in Tavistock will support it, and I hope they will, and will take the hit this time. But this will probably be the last lot of money that this council can afford to put into a project such as this. Only recently we've been talking about increasing the reserves the council holds, because if you hold reserves, what with inflation, the reserves reduce year by year, and if you don't increase your reserves in line with inflation, the actual monetary value, in other words, what you can get from it, becomes less and less. And this year we've been called upon to spend the best part of 800,000 already. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. My message is given.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hipsey.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. I didn't realise it was my turn. I'd like to.
It probably isn't. It was probably Councillor Ridges, but sorry. Carry on. Councillor Ridges, please.
Are you sure? I'm very happy for Councillor
Yes.
to go first.
No, you carry on.
You're happy with the batting order, are you? Good, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'd just like to start by thanking Mr. Brooke and Mrs. Buckle for a really comprehensive paper. I think residents can see what quality officers we have at West Devon Borough Council dealing with complex issues, and this will run, and also their scrutiny and the level of high level of intelligence will be needed as we probably go on with the contract with Fusion. I think members and residents should also note the excellent points made by Councillor Cheadle. This is a discretionary service, and we have huge financial pressures as a council going forward. But I will state that I'm a huge supporter of all leisure and sporting facilities in the borough, both publicly and privately owned, for their social and health benefits, and in particular at the moment, the role that they must play in tackling our obesity epidemic. I've always been disappointed with the very low levels of residents' usage of Meadowlands and Parklands at only 6%. Fusion's communications and advertising is clearly lacking. In the northeast of the borough where I reside, the facilities are little used in this ward. Fusion simply do not communicate effectively. It would only cost roughly £250 to send a door drop out once a year to the Drew Stainton and Tragford wards, and probably £100 to run a Facebook campaign. That's very little investment in getting residents around the borough into these facilities. Low penetration was not an issue when Fusion were effectively paying it us, but it is when West Devon are now paying them. We have a situation where 94% of residents are subsidising the 6% of users of the facilities. This is not acceptable, and Fusion must do more to widen the penetration into all areas of the borough. I think we should further analyse the geography of the usage of these sites, and it may make sense in the long term for the town councils to take up provision if we're not getting borough-wide usage. In the short term, I will be supporting the proposals and taking forward for the health and welfare benefits of the ward, but I have reservations, and we must get greater engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Hipsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope I haven't got in. Oh no, sorry. Councillor Jory's comment was just a comment.
It was just a comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can I just reiterate what Councillor Richards has just said and has been said several times during the debate so far, that clearly these centres are very important in terms of general well-being. I'd like also to remind members that especially for young people, pools in general are very important places for youngsters to learn, and they also have a role in teaching young people to save their lives when the worst happens and they find themselves struggling in water. It's my view that every young person should have the opportunity to learn to swim for this very reason. Something else that is specific to the Meadowlands Centre is it has been pointed out by various people that there is an alternative close to the town in Mount Kelly, the Mount Kelly pool. However, the research that I've done indicates that the Mount Kelly provision is rather limited in that it is used by a lot of swim clubs, even a lot from Plymouth and elsewhere. So that limits that alternative. Also, I've been told, I've never been into the Mount Kelly pool, but I'm told that it's rather deep and is completely unsuitable for the toddlers and so on, people like that. For those reasons and many others, I will be supporting option 3B in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearce, please. Just before we do, can you make sure that everybody is on mute, please? Councillor Pearce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, as has already been stated, this is a significant amount of money coming out of our reserves for a small percentage of our residents. And I'm wondering what the 94% of people who might be listening in to this debate are wondering what is going on, because from a purely business aspect, it is total madness to take this amount of money out of reserves to fund such a small percentage of our residents. I understand what members are saying about the benefits, and I sincerely hope that Fusion does a much better marketing job than they have done in the past. Their communication with their existing members has been dreadful in the period of the lockdown, and we certainly need to make sure that that improves. I have mixed feelings about this, because when we come to next year and we're looking at our finances and what we're going to do in our budget, we're going to have some very difficult, far more difficult decisions than this one is for us to proceed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Musgrove, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have considered very carefully the required funding, and it gives me really great concern that we do have to rely on so much in the way of loans and borrowing. I'm conscious that, however, the benefits, in my view, of these leisure facilities far outweigh the costs. I do feel that we are struggling to survive, but the funding is clearly the big issue. I do, however, want to just focus a little bit on the benefits of the leisure facilities, and that's from children learning to swim right through to GP referrals, right through to the use by the swimming club. It is an extraordinary facility, and particularly at Meadowlands. I also feel that it ought to be recognised. I do worry about this 5% usage, and I have real concern about those statistics. I do hope we have a chance to explore them a little bit and fully understand those, because it clearly is worrying if only 5% of our population are actually making use of the pool. I will, however, fully endorse and very happy to support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vashon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think most of the comments I was going to make have been made previously, particularly about the funding situation for the council. But as a council, we're not obliged to provide leisure facilities. It's not a legal requirement, but it is a moral obligation to improve and promote health and well-beingness. And I think we've all got a little bit complacent over the last few weeks regarding the pandemic. Although we've all made huge, great sacrifices, but we need to address this in light of the recent increase of cases and further restrictions. But the people need to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And vaccines will be the hope and saviour from the pandemic, but the return to normality must include leisure activities. So the facility must be there waiting, like us, patiently, for life to return to normal. If we can find the funds to keep the facilities open, then it is our moral duty to ensure that Parklands and Meadowlands are ready and fit for purpose, especially if restrictions are increased. I know this is a bit of like jam tomorrow comment, but we need to feel that all our efforts so far to combat the pandemic have a purpose and we have a reward at the end of it. I will be supporting option 3B because I think we have at this point we do have the facility and the funds to back it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Coulson.
Thank you. A point I'd like to raise is, yes, I agree. If this was a business, we certainly would not be supporting this. But as Councillor Vashon has just raised out, there's a moral duty here as well. And I feel confident that we've, through this debate, the excellent work of Mrs. Buckle and Mr. Brooks, we've shown due diligence in considering all the costs involved. That said, given the costs that we will be incurring, this significant cost of incurring, I think we have a responsibility to maximise the use of this pool. As I said, 6% of the population use this, so we really need to show value for money for this. So going forward, I think, as said already, we need to make sure that Fusion and ourselves do a much better job of publicising the use of this pool. And that would begin with, I believe, with making it more accessible to those who work core working hours, so the earlier opening and later closing. So people who, in their working lives, have more disposable income can make the most of this pool, and that may well help the financial situation. I will be supporting 3B for reopening this pool. We do have Mount Kelly, as others have said, but both of my children didn't learn to swim there when they were toddlers. It was just shallow play pools that they gained their confidence in before going to Mount Kelly for formalised lessons. So this is a hugely important asset from that perspective, giving our children confidence in the water, and I will be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, I see that you agree with Councillor Richards. Would you like to expand?
Yes, thank you. I do agree that we are in danger of focusing on 4% of our population who use these facilities, wonderful though they are. Also, that we can't define our moral responsibility as being as it was a year ago, because we have less money than a year ago. And moral responsibility is also prudence. We can't continue to support something that, or however wonderful it is, we don't have the funds for. As a next level, I would very much dislike to be part of a council that stopped something as wonderful as the swimming facility and all the attendant benefits that it has in the community. But if we can't afford it, maybe it's a moment to start thinking about Not today, but tomorrow. Thank you.
Can I make a point of order here, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It was just to anyone's confused. I am supporting that we open centres. I think the only point of difference I was making is that I'm supporting the opening of the centres in the short term. We should do some further analysis of the geography of the usage, and if it means in the long term it's only used by the residents of Tavistock and Oakhampton very centrally, we should have further considerations on who takes this over. Maybe it's a town council responsibility if usage isn't ward-wide, and that was the only point I'm making. But fundamentally, I'm supporting it. So if anyone's confused,
Also, I'm supporting it for now. I totally agree with you, Councillor Ridges. This isn't a long-term decision. We are just doing it because we have to put a patch on a problem. But we need to think very carefully about where we go next.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Edmonds, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, in July, I supported the interim financial support package to reopen Parklands on the basis that when the longer-term decision had to be made in September, it would be on the strength of a comprehensive report and supporting financial information. The report in front of me today certainly meets those criteria, and I'm grateful to Mrs. Bucko and Mr. Brooke and their respective teams for producing a comprehensive summary of the options available to us as members for what is a very difficult situation for the Council. Paragraph 2.6 of the report summarises the Council's position well, which has helped me to weigh up the options and to decide the way forward. It says that should further funds be made available to Fusion, the Council must consider its own financial position, the value of delivering health and well-being to the borough, the extent of delivery across the borough, the Council's reputation, and the legal requirements of the contract. I'm mindful of the excellent work undertaken by Mrs. Bucko and Mr. Brooke in negotiating the Council's financial support on a loan basis, repayable by Fusion over the remaining period of the contract, and that is a factor in my decision-making process. I also commend the efforts of Mr. Bates for the work he has done in establishing an ongoing dialogue with councils who are also Fusion customers. I do have a concern about Fusion's poor communication with its members and the council, as highlighted in the report, but I trust that the measures now put in place at the insistence of officers will resolve this issue. I've considered the alternatives for the provision of leisure services set out in the report, and it is clear to me that there is no easy alternative to the current Fusion arrangement. For example, the procurement of an alternative provider would incur significant costs with a lengthy procurement process, during which time both centres would very likely be closed. Staying with the Fusion contract gives the Council the opportunity to receive the anticipated income over the life of the contract, also an opportunity to recover the funds lent to them during this period of support. And of course, we continue to provide health and well-being facilities across the borough. The financial impact of providing additional support to Fusion is an important consideration. We have today approved an amended revenue budget for this financial year, although financial uncertainties will remain for some time due to the ongoing health crisis, and whilst we wait patiently, or should that be impatiently, for the outcome of the government's spending review. The Council will this week submit a detailed response to the government's comprehensive spending review consultation, urging them to make early decisions on key funding streams such as new homes bonus, negative report support grant, business rate baseline, and the rural services delivery grant. It is intended that the cost of providing full leisure facilities in the borough until the end of March will be taken from an earmarked reserve. Not an easy decision, but one that I feel we need to make. Whatever happens, we have a legal duty to pay the mothballing cost of $92,000 for both centres. Parklands has reopened. Surely it would be difficult to reverse that decision now, and I would be uncomfortable leaving Meadowlands closed whilst Parklands remains open. Our earmark reserves currently stand at 4.9 million, so I'm confident that a decision to support Fusion in reopening both centres until the end of the financial year will not threaten the financial stability of the council or diminish the current level of customer services across the borough. On that basis, Mr. Mayor, I shall be supporting the amended recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful to everyone for their contribution to the debate today and echo a lot of what has been said. Clearly, the work of the officers in producing this report has been exemplary. And as I say, I'm very grateful both for the contribution, but also the commitment of members right across the borough on something that, as we've said, does attract fairly low usage, but nevertheless, I think is really important. The importance of those leisure centres should not be underestimated, not least children learning to swim and the importance of that as a life skill. We do need to widen participation, but I would also urge members not to forget that the agreement that we originally signed with Fusion did contain a significant income projections, which will be an important part of our future income, and we do need to work towards getting back to that position. As I said when I introduced the debate, it is option 3B that is on the table, so I'm glad that members are referring to that, and we must bear that in mind when we come to vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wood, please.
Hello. Thanks everyone. I've listened very carefully all afternoon to all of the debate and all the questions, and I think a lot of my points have already been brought up, but I wanted to talk about the 6% that are using the pool, and to emphasise that those people that are using it are often parents with small children, they are the less well off, and they are the people in need, and they often do really need this facility. So although it is only 6% of our residents that are using those facilities, they are very important to those people. And I'll be supporting the opening of both pools this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Radcliffe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first of all would like to share the views of all the previous speakers. I totally agree with them. My main thoughts within all this, with the letters I've been receiving from residents about this, and very polite and very interesting letters, is that in my youth, very little children could swim. And I wouldn't like to return to those dark days when people couldn't swim. And I think the ability of being able to swim is priceless. Again, in my youth, and again shared by other residents of Tavistock who've written to me, the only option for us was to swim in rivers and ponds. And then we had sort of the outbreak of poliomyelitis from poor sewage treatment, and a lot of people were seriously ill, including a girl I went to school with. So I really wouldn't want to go back to those days. I fully support option 3B, but I do think we have to make it clear to Fusion that we in West Devon do not have a bottomless pocket, and from now on they've got to become self-sufficient. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make my comment in the right place this time. We've been informed that if agreed, this is not a grant to Fusion, but a one-off loan, and it will be repaid over the life of the contract. So I think as long as Fusion know that there won't be any more, and I agree with Councillor Radcliffe that it's very, very important children have facility to learn to swim, but that I think Fusion just need to know that this is it for us because of our own financial position and the stretch on our reserves. But I will be supporting this proposal to reopen both leisure centres at this time, because I think the alternative is closure, which will bring its own costs and not just the financial ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully in right order. Councillor Moody.
Yes, I did spot the deliberate mistake, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to obviously echo everybody's thoughts today that of thanks to the officers and members and particularly to the residents who've contacted local councillors. And I think, you know, being a Tavistock focused councillor, obviously I applaud the support that Meadowlands is receiving today, but in a way I feel sorry for Meadowlands, and I don't just a little bit of a history story for many of us, just to cast your mind back to when a large amount of money was spent on Meadowlands for its refurbishment, the new gym, the new exercise suite, the cafe, etc. Not too long afterwards, someone drove into the front door and caused a dislocation of the entry. So, and then now we have COVID. So I think that Borough Meadowlands has had a little bit of a rough time recently, but I do believe that it is a very important facility in Tavistock. It attracts families, it helps young children to swim, as has been mentioned. And as I think one of the other speakers has said, I think it was Councillor Bridgewater, that it actually attracts people from Plymouth. With the leisure centre in Plymouth being closed for some considerable time going forward, it will attract more people to Plymouth, from Plymouth to Tavistock, which also will bring in a footfall into the town, which will help with the local economy, which is part of our concerns as well. But I'm also I'll certainly be supporting the vote today. But I also take on board what other members have said, is that we really need to keep the message out there that the central government, we've got to get the message to central government. We've got to lobby our MPs to ensure that sufficient funds are being put into the leisure industry. It was a question that was debated in the House of Parliament today, but the response from the Prime Minister when asked what was happening was, well, we are looking into it. But I think we need to keep pressure on central government for better funding for the leisure industry. Thank you. You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I keep coughing, that's the problem. I think that's the end of any comments, debates. I would just like to say, with my health and well-being hat on, that, well, firstly, thank you very much for a very good debate. I certainly agree with many of the comments that have been made. And I'd also like to pass on my thanks to the officers for their extremely hard work in putting this all together, and certainly working with Fusion. Fusion certainly have to get their act together, especially on the communication side. And for me, I think it's absolutely imperative that we get the medical referrals going as soon as possible. I sort of understood they were going to go ahead at Parklands and was very disappointed that they didn't. This time round, I think it has to be a must. So I'll leave my comments at that. Councillor Jury, would you like to do a sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've heard some very interesting debate today. One thing that, well, there are two things that are very clear. One is our own financial situation and the fact that this is not, in financial terms, an easy decision to make. And I applaud all those councillors who are aware of that situation. And we all know the task that is ahead of us in making sure that we can continue to keep the council finances on an even keel whilst providing important, well-regarded services such as the leisure centres. The other is the importance of the leisure centres to the communities that use them, and I do think we will do extra work with our newfound relationship with Fusion to improving communications and increasing that participation. So I think that aspect of the debate has been very useful. Other than that, I commend the recommendations to the council.
Thank you very much. Now we can move to a vote. Mr. White, should we go for a recorded vote for this one?
It'd be my recommendation, Mr. Mayor, due to the significance of the item ahead of us and the length of the debate, it'd be preferable to have a recorded vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, if you could take that forward, please.
Thank you, will do. In alphabetical order, members, Councillor Ball.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, are we voting on the recommendations en bloc with the specific choice of 3B? I just want to be, sorry, 3B. Just want to be clear about what I'm voting on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. If I can just confirm, I've updated the recommendation from the report as was proposed by Councillor Jory and seconded by Councillor Leach. If you look at the screens now, that is actually what we're voting on en bloc. So there's been a lot of reference to 3B, but it's actually been now revised to a new little 3. So that was actually what was proposed and seconded. So as per the screens en bloc, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. White. With my binoculars, I am now able to see the recommendation, and my vote is for.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bridgewater?
For.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Coulson.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Crozier.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Davies.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Hipsey.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Jory.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Moody.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Mott.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Enders.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Ridges.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Southcott.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Spettigue.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Vashon.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
For.
Thank you, and Councillor Yelland.
For.
Thank you, members. That is therefore 29 votes in favour, which is unanimous, and the proposal is therefore declared carried. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. White. Right, we move on to item 9, climate change and biodiversity strategy. Unfortunately, this item has been deferred until the next full council. As there are still some amendments required. So we can move straight on to item 10, designation of monitoring officer. Councillor Jury to introduce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The paper in front of you is the end result of a review by the Chief Executive. You'll note that the post of monitoring officer had historically been with a particular member of staff, and it's now ended up annexed to a fairly senior post within the organisation. The Chief Executive was concerned that he wanted to ensure the clarity of accountability of the statutory function that is the role of the monitoring officer, and the paper sets out a route for changing the designation of the monitoring officer role. The intention is that it should rest with the vacant head of legal services, and it would be proposed to designate the appointee to that role when it happens as the monitoring officer. It's a fairly complicated argument, I think, but I see the benefit of it, and I'd welcome any questions from members about the proposal that we're looking to implement.
All is quiet. No one typing. Oops, yes, we have. Councillor Bridges, please. Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Councillor Jury. Just could you go through the financial implications of this? Because just looking at, from what I understand, is that the monitoring officer currently loses. The monitoring officer's responsibilities and duties go from the business manager specialist role, but they carry on being paid for another 18 months. Is that correct?
Let me I'm struggling at the moment with getting the right bit of paper in front of me. I wonder whether Mr. Bates might be able to answer that one whilst I do so.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm very happy to. That is correct, Councillor Bridges. The monitoring officer role is one which carries a special responsibility allowance. That is the way in which the additional duties attached to the role are provided for. We are making this proposed change subject to council approval today. It's a decision which impacts the current post holder and may well have impacted her decisions around posts that she would have applied for in the past, and as such we believe it's acceptable and responsible in this case to continue that payment for a period of 18 months by way of salary protection. So it is that period just to cover an adjustment during that time. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you. Just to clarify, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sellers.
Yes, thanks. Sorry, I was wanting to ask a question. I just had a difficulty with the screen. If these changes which are proposed go through, will there be any savings in the long term to the council?
Happy to respond, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like me to.
Yes, please.
I think the savings will come in a different way, Councillor Sellis. So my concern at the moment is we have an officer who is being stretched between an important role of managing a considerable number of staff within the organisation, and also carrying out the functioning of monitoring officer. It's very difficult to do both of those jobs well, and I think by focusing attention on the core part of her activity, that will bring efficiencies over the long run and benefits to the council. Equally, I think having a dedicated monitoring officer will do the same. So whilst we might not see this immediately in financial terms, I think we will see it in terms of good governance and probably considerable savings in time by doing things right in the first place and not having to deal with mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I have a supplementary, please, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thanks. Well, that sounds great, and I can understand that. Thank you. Would it be possible for members to have a family tree as such of the legal department then? Because frequently councillors have issues where we need to get legal advice, and it would be very useful to be able to be directed to the specific and pertinent officer. If that could be arranged, that would be. I personally would find that very useful. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Council Service, we'd be happy to do that. And as you'll see, there's a recommendation in the report that we will also carry out a review to ensure that we've got the right skills and capacity within the team. So we'll happily provide you with the current version. We'll also provide that updated version once we've undertaken that work. Thank you.
I thought you would. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Right, Councillor Spidgate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's a very quick one. So, I think, am I right in thinking that the additional cost is actually quite nominal because there's a vacant post already there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Spettigue. We have a vacant head of legal. We plan to recruit to the head of legal and designate that with the role of monitoring officer as well. So the additional cost is a one-off, as I described earlier to Councillor Ridgers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll ask again. Any more questions? Nobody typing, so Councillor Jury, would you like to carry on with the recommendations? And
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendations 1 to 4 shown on page 47 of the agenda papers. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we can go into debate. Do we have any debates?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. I can't get my screen right.
Okay, Councillor Ewings.
I tried to do it as a question. On, where are we? Point 3 of the recommendations, we're saying that we're going to appoint via an external recruitment process. Does that mean none of our internals can apply, or that we're going outside as well as inside?
If you'd like me to reply,
yes, please,
Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Ewings. The intention is that we will advertise externally to the role, but of course anybody suitably qualified within the council will be more than welcome to apply to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive.
Okay, so any debate? No more. Councillor Richards, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to state, I think this seems very overgenerous. I know there's obviously negotiations with the individual concerned, but you lose the responsibility and keep the enhanced salary for 18 months. I can understand some, but it just seems a bit excessive to me. That's all. I'll put that point forward.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Yes, I should have got recommendations 1 and 4 proposed and second. Brain has gone dead as whether I did or I didn't. I apologise. Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of any debate, I think we can take this by exception. So if any members are not willing to support recommendations 1 to 4, if they could indicate so on the chat box.
Oh, we've got all of a sudden a question popped up from Councillor Sellis.
Thanks. Yes, it is a question. Is it usual to have 18 months grace protected salary?
Mr. Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is the maximum period within our policy, and in this case, I do think it reflects the importance of the role the person has done, the decisions that were taken by the council through the previous senior management restructuring, and I do think that I take the point that Councillor Ridgers makes about the cost, but I think this will be overall in the efficiency of the council to move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Now, finally, is there any more questions or debate? Preferably debate. There's nobody typing. So, Councillor Jury, would you like to sum up then we go to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the proposals are as shown in front of you. I think this is something that will lead to additional clarification and remove that role from somebody who has a very responsible role within the organisation, thereby improving response times and attention that the role deserves. So I commend it to members.
Thank you very much. So, as Mr. White has said, if anybody has any concerns, if nobody types.
We've got an abstention for the record from Councillor Ridges, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I see. Thank you, Councillor Richards. Okay, Mr. White, that's
Thank you very much. So therefore, members, we can assume we've got 28 members in favour with 1 abstention. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 11, appointment of electoral registration officer and returning officer. Another job for Councillor Cherry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is quite a simple proposal that is in front of you. We're required to confirm the post of the electoral registration officer and returning officer, and we'd like to confirm the appointment to that post of the Deputy Chief Exec and Director of Customer Service for the job involving West Devon Council. I would like to point out that the Chief Exec and Head of Paid Service is the returning officer for South Hams. As you'll know, when there are elections going on, the same person cannot be in the same place in 2 places at the same time. So we have always split the roles to different individuals. And I know that Mr. Molyneux has done this job in an exemplary manner in the past, and I would commend him to be appointed to this role. I will take any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, gone mute again. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just out of interest, who will be the Deputy Returning Officer for South Hams?
I'm not sure. Mr. Bates, are you able to answer that one for me?
Yes, it will be Mr. Powell. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jury and Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, Councillor Jury, would you like to take the recommendation through to
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendations 1 and 2, which are shown on page 53 of the agenda papers. If I could have a seconder, please.
Second that. Mr. Crozier. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. White, by exception.
As we speak at the moment, Mr. Mayor, there's no one indicating a wish to speak in the debate. So it's my recommendation that we can take this one by exception. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone wants to type? Wonderful.
Again, for the benefit of the screen, Mr. Mayor, there is no one indicating a wish to vote against that recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. That then brings us to the end of our agenda. It's been a long day. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending and all the work the officers have had to put into this agenda. So I now officially close this meeting at Old English 4:15. And if we can close the live stream.